Welcome. I'm Kim Kautzer with WriteShop, and we're going to talk about college prep, our writing and study skills on track. If your bookshelf looks anything like mine did when we were homeschooling, it probably holds an assortment of curriculum you stopped and started at various times along the way. Sometimes, like us, maybe you just couldn't get into a curriculum for various reasons and you ended up finding alternatives. Then there are those that you fully intended to use, and for whatever reason, you started and stopped along the way. Like for us, my son needed a foreign language in order to meet his college entrance requirements. And I don't know, it just wasn't working for us. We kept starting, stopping. I wasn't in love with the curriculum. And by the time we realized that we weren't going to get done with Spanish before he graduated from high school, I was kind of apoplectic at that point, and I know it was stressful for him. It kept sliding to the back burner, and one day we just didn't have enough time. He ended up having to use some college credits for foreign language, and in the end, it was fine. But at the time, it was stressful for us. And I'm guessing that writing might be one of those subjects that you keep starting and stopping. Does your teen drag his feet? Maybe it's your child failing to finish assignments, complaining day and night, or maybe it's you, the parent. You're having trouble following through with lesson planning or getting the editing done so that your student can continue on with an assignment. But whatever the reason, we're going to make a commitment. We're going to start fresh, make a plan, stick to your goals, and I'm going to talk about how to do that today. For high schoolers, there's more to planning for college than simply getting accepted. Unless your student has experienced a more rigorous course of study and has learned some good study habits along the way, he's going to be overwhelmed to arrive on campus assuming that he's going away to college. He may not, but even working from home, commuting, discovering the mountains of reading and writing and studying that are going to wait for him. So the two of you need to work together now to prepare. In doing so, you're going to help deter the stress and the erratic grades that separate the unequipped college freshman from the equipped. So in the first part of my talk, we're going to look at 5 guidelines to help you develop good study habits that will serve your son or daughter well in college. And in the second part, we're going to zero in specifically on writing skills. Okay, so let's talk about promoting good work habits. And the first one we're going to talk about is creating a quiet workspace for studying and studying alone. If you can designate a spot in your home that's separated from the family room or the kitchen or other distracting high traffic areas in your house, it's going to be better. I understand the challenge of a small house. You may need to get creative. It may be that your student has to wear noise canceling headphones if you don't have alternatives for quieter places to work. Maybe it needs getting out of the house. And again, that could be a challenge nowadays. But on family library days, for instance, we would find a quiet corner where one of my kids could work. Our library has a private study rooms too available. So that could be the case at yours. The benefit of this quiet workspace is that it teaches students to separate work time from rest and relaxation. It promotes concentration during study times. It produces better results in less time. It helps your teen deal with distractions of noisy dorms and social temptations like, hey, let's go get coffee. And it's going to help your student learn that there's a time for work and a time for play, and that's what we need to focus on with setting aside this quiet space. In addition to your quiet space, it's going to be important for your student to learn to limit social networking. And this is going to be a hard one, not just for your kids, but for all of us, because we have become attached to our cell phones. It's really hard for us to go to the bathroom without our cell phone. We can't go upstairs or go into the backyard. We've got to be connected. For some reason, we feel like it's a painful thing to be separated from all the invisible people out there if we don't have our phone with us. But kids need to learn to set their phones aside when they're studying so they can get more done. We need to face that they live in a world of distraction. They live in this modern world with phones and texting and messages and Snapchat and other social networking opportunities that are going to distract them and call them away from their work. So they need to learn to establish boundaries for themselves if they're going to get any work done at all. So when they put aside their phone or they turn off the internet, it's like hanging an electronic do not disturb sign. So another way to limit social networking, and believe me, you're not going to win a popularity contest with your teens with this one, but it's unplug, basically. It is a no-brainer, really. If the internet and the cell phone are turned off, it's impossible to get online. It's impossible to get interrupted by a text while working on an essay or a report. Now, if your teen needs to do research online, of course they need to have access to the internet. But you can separate the research process from the writing process. They can work online, they can do their research and their studying, but then disconnect from the internet when the research is complete. Your teen's going to ask you, what's the big deal? I can do all this. I can bounce back and forth. I don't get distracted, but they do. When they're trying to work at the computer and they're toggling back and forth between an email and a private message and whatever, they lose the ability to focus and concentrate. And then the quality of their work will suffer, and it requires more time to finish. And the interruptions themselves take time. And no matter how short the breaks, they're going to require your student to keep refocusing when he or she finally returns to the task, right? So even from my own experience, I know I've got things open all over my desktop, and I've got an email open on my laptop. So I've got a computer here. I've got piles of projects on the table. I flip back and forth, and sometimes I close out my day feeling like I got absolutely nothing done. And I end up with all these loose ends dangling everywhere. And I kind of feel like I have as much on my to-do list at the end of the day as when I woke up. So part of it is learning to set examples for our kids, because if that's how we're acting at the computer, it's modeling bad behavior for them. And I'm the first to admit that that's hard for me. But our teens do need to learn to concentrate, to commit to one project at a time, to steer clear of their social media and their phone while they're working, and they will become more productive. And they can either pick off a whole bunch of little tasks or take a nice chunk out of a bigger project. And then they'll have a big sense of accomplishment, and they're learning to separate work from play, because there's not going to be somebody in their dorm room to help them make these wise choices. So your student can discover how much easier it is to write a paper in this uninterrupted chunk of time, or they can just go cold turkey to school and then find out they've never really mastered this ability to plan their time wisely. So talking about time, that leads us to our third point, and that is beware the homeschool time trap. So could you imagine a college student telling his professor, hey, can I have another week? My sister was hogging the computer. Or, oh gosh, I'm really sorry that I missed that test yesterday. I was too tired, but I'll make it up later this afternoon. Now, sure, we can laugh about how ridiculous this sounds. Chances are it's happened at your house. Homeschoolers are notorious for working whenever, and no one cares, really, whether the kids work in the morning or the afternoon or well into evening, as long as the work gets done, right? So if they have a history test or a science test, most students are going to work till they finish the test. We're not going to really pay attention to the clock. If you assign a report on, photosynthesis, and you tell them it's due next Friday, then Friday arrives and there's no paper, and you say, it's not ready yet. Oh, well, just get it to me as soon as you can. We don't feel the sense of urgency when we homeschool. That exists when there are deadlines to meet, when our students would be, let's say, in a private school or a public school or in college. There's this false sense of security as homeschoolers. We have time. What's the rush? He's only 14. It's our privilege. We're homeschooling. There's no need for rules. And all of that is true, but the result can be that we don't give due dates, or we don't stick to them if we do give due dates, or we don't assign consequences if the assignments are late. And in the real world, this isn't going to fly. So if your teen is used to having all the time in the world, he'll be in for a rude awakening when college hits, and then there are scheduled classes and syllabuses filled with deadlines, and there's nobody watching over his shoulder to remind him to stay on task. So now that leads us to our fourth point, and that is encouraging responsible study habits. So since we homeschoolers often let deadlines slide, maybe it's time to establish some boundaries. I like to recommend creating some kind of a study system that's going to be helpful to you to keep track of your deadlines. A really great idea is to post a large monthly calendar in a prominent spot on your fridge or in your schoolroom, where you can step back and see at a glance the clearly marked essay or the project deadlines and the test dates. It gives your teen a quick daily review of a panorama of impending deadlines. Okay, so this prevents the dreaded due date creep, where suddenly it dawns on your teen that he has a test and an essay and a science project all due in the next 2 days. And this can be whether you yourself are assigning them, or whether your child is in a co-op or another class. Maybe they're doing a Zoom class. But this encourages your child's calendar to pace himself more carefully when working on big projects or multiple projects, because it helps to spread the work over several days or weeks. They can start the project early enough to avoid pulling all-nighters, and it prepares him for handling multiple deadlines that typify college work. So what can you do to help your teen develop consistency and routine? First, let's debunk the myth of working better under pressure. All-nighters and day before heroics will drain college students, and really they don't impress professors. While we moms may say, oh, we work better under pressure, in truth, it's stressful and it's counterproductive, and our families bear the brunt of our long hours and our short tempers because we've waited till the last minute. It is better for everybody to learn to schedule work in advance and tackle that work with our full attention. So this is all part of teaching our student to become a successful high school and college student. So let's talk about tests. If you haven't been doing this, it's time to stop giving open-ended tests and start imposing time limits. Now, you may not be a test-giving family, and that is fine. But if you are, and you're accustomed to giving, say, a Becca or BJU textbook tests, realize that they're designed to complete in a 45 to 50-minute class period. So if you're not getting them done in that period of time, then your child is used to the idea that tests can take as long as he wants, and he doesn't learn to pace himself. You also have to deal with reports and papers and projects. So start by breaking assignments into chunks. So establish mini due dates along the way. This is so important. So for an example, with a research paper, you can set due dates for picking a topic, brainstorming, writing a thesis statement, note-taking and research, making an outline, preparing a bibliography, and turning in rough and final drafts. So these things can all be put onto the master calendar. And then it helps your student avoid the panicked late night study sessions, particularly if your student's taking an outside class, where it's not just you they're accountable to, but they're accountable to another teacher. So together you can take a moment each day to survey the calendar. How much work is there to do today? How much time do we have available? And then you help your student follow a plan. And this is going to reduce stress and allow your child to better enjoy free time, because it ultimately proves indispensable when they're facing the additional demands of college coursework that's coupled with all the social activities that they may want to get involved in when they're on campus. So what is the fifth way to promote good work habits? And that is to encourage your student to use both pen and keyboard. Now, this may seem odd because in this day and age, we do everything on computer, right? We type, we do everything. But there are benefits to writing by hand. About 10, 12 years ago, the College Board introduced an essay portion to the SAT college entrance exams. And at the time, a newspaper reported about a private school in Connecticut that was using laptops only beginning in second grade. So that would be like your Chromebooks that some of the schools are using today. Except for math, everything was done on the computer. When this SAT test was announced, it threw everybody in the school into a tailspin because their high schoolers were simply not prepared to write in longhand. And to my knowledge, those SAT essays still require pencil and paper. Your child is always going to have to face situations where she needs to write by hand, whether it's taking notes, doing some job applications, timed essays. There will be times to type and times to write by hand. But if they don't have practice writing by hand, they're going to have a tough time of it when they're faced with in-class essays that are not on the computer, when they are not allowed to use an electronic device. They sit at the desk with pencil and paper and they must write. Spell check isn't always accurate. They need to, by learning to write by hand, they can better proofread for spelling and grammar. It also improves their expression of ideas and their retention of information. So there have been studies that show when children write by hand, they consistently produce more words more quickly than on a keyboard, and they also express more ideas. So it's important for teens to keep up this skill. They also learn better when they take notes by hand than when they type on a keyboard. Still, there are benefits to typing. It is the wave of the future. You should start getting your kids comfortable with a keyboard at an early age. So if your teen's not typing well yet, get a typing program and make sure their proficiency is up. If you're starting with younger children, they've got all kinds of fun typing programs that are digital that you can find online, and just go ahead and start getting them prepared to be comfortable with using a keyboard. I am the first to admit that a neatly typed paper is much easier for you as a parent to edit, or for me. It's easier for a student to make changes before printing out a final draft. So that's another reason that they need to learn to type. It just makes it easier. And of course, they'll be turning in typed papers all through their college careers. So use both in your homeschool. When writing a composition or an essay, for example, you might require a handwritten first draft, and then subsequent drafts can be typed. Or maybe all the drafts are being typed, and that's okay, but make sure your timed essays are being done by hand. There's got to be enough balance of handwriting to typing that they will not be thrown off by having to do a handwritten timed essay. So now we've spent some time looking at the importance of promoting good work habits in general, and now we're going to jump into focusing specifically on the importance of strong writing skills. Writing is a really critical skill because the demands of college require writing proficiency. This is not a surprise. I'm sure that you would expect that, right? So a parent told me, I got a call today from my daughter, who's a senior at Colorado Christian University. She said, please tell homeschool moms to have their kids write, and write some more. This mom went on to say, I had my kids write, but apparently not enough. Her supervisory teacher is not happy with her writing skills, even though she took writing and English at our community college while she was in high school. We can't ignore the growing trend that teens graduating from high school are unprepared and unequipped for the rigors of college writing. Homeschooling is amazing, and we can teach our kids so many great skills, but writing is scary for some moms. And if you keep putting writing off, you're not doing your kids a favor. And therefore, a lot of kids are entering college with poor writing ability because no one paid much attention to their writing when they were in their K-12 years. A professor once had a student come into his office with her test in hand, and she had scored really poorly on 3 of the essay questions. And she complained, I never had to write essay answers before. It seemed that throughout all of her previous years of schooling, she had taken almost nothing but true, false, and multiple choice tests. One college English professor laments that about 1 in 4 freshmen lacks the most basic skills, and those students who do write are vague and ineffective and often incoherent in their results. They can't form sentences that are free of grammatical or punctuation and spelling errors, and they can't organize sentences into effective paragraphs. So it's a problem. Second, students who lack writing skills won't always be able to fall back on the university. They can waste valuable college time taking remedial classes, but sometimes they're not offered. And if they are offered, there's a waiting list, 20 students deep, to get in to these remedial courses. And those courses will set your student back an extra semester sometimes because they've got to take these prereqs in order to be able to get into standard English. So you're not doing your kids a favor to avoid writing. I really want to encourage you to spend time working on that. Third, the professionalism of the workplace is going to demand good writing skills. To many teens, essays or research papers are just a bunch of busy work. They don't see the reasoning behind them. They don't take them seriously. They put them off to the last minute because they don't think they're going to have any use for this in the future. So they do the bare minimum to squeak by. And this doesn't bode well for their future employment because I can't stress well enough how important their solid writing skills are going to be among your students' skill set for future employment. In a competitive marketplace, an employer isn't going to take them seriously if their cover letters and their resumes aren't articulate, and they're not going to keep their jobs if they can't make sense when they write reports and memos. Not every job is going to require this kind of writing, but you say, well, my child's going to be a scientist. They have a lot of writing to do in science. My child's going to be, a plumber. That's fine, but he still has to write enough to be able to communicate well. So make sure that this is not something that you are skipping. It doesn't matter whether or not your students are college bound, your employers want to hire candidates who are already proficient in their basic communication skills. So this means that if they expect to succeed in the workplace, they need better than average writing skills. And they'll also need a good grasp of the writing process and the necessary tools to conquer the blank page so that they can write articulately and persuasively if the call arises. So now that I've made you a nervous wreck, let's talk about how you can prepare your teens. One is to focus on basic but key writing skills throughout junior high and high school to help start preparing them. Minimally, by the time they graduate from high school, they should know how to write clearly and concisely. So teach them to build clear sentences around active verbs. That's just one simple way to help your kids stand out from the crowd. Another is to make sure that they're using correct conventions of grammar, punctuation, and spelling. They should be having a good grasp of proper sentence structure and be able to proofread and edit their own work. Also, teach specific kinds of writing to ensure mastery of core skills. And this is going to be achieved through writing quality compositions and basic business correspondence on an ongoing and regular basis, not one here and one there, but over the course of each school year in junior high and high school, they should be writing quite a few different kinds of writing. And we'll talk a little bit more of that. Basically, they should know how to write a business letter, a professional email, a resume, a clear, well-organized essay, and a research paper. It's also important to sharpen their grammar and their punctuation skills because if you've spent any time on Facebook, you know that adult misuse of grammar and punctuation is a growing problem. And, some people may wonder, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just sending a text or I'm just, putting a post up. And that's okay. It has its time and place, but really There is a huge rise in incorrect use of punctuation and homophones, so along with poor and often awkward sentence structure. A misplaced apostrophe may not seem like a big deal to some, but it can make you seem ignorant and uneducated. So here's a quote from a professor at the University of Colorado, Robert Pasnaugh, and he said this to his students: "You will be judged for your entire life on the basis of how well you write. If you write well, people will think you're smart. If you write poorly, they'll think you're dumb. That is perhaps unfair, but it is the reality." Whether or not they mean to, people often form first impressions simply by reading our writing. So if we don't use good conventions in our writing, it can make an otherwise great paper ineffective. So no matter how compelling your student's argument, some people aren't going to get past the glare of the mechanical errors. Your child may have really interesting, clever things to say, but if his command of the English language usage is poor, it will get in the way of a good written message, and that's a shame. The good thing is it's never too late to learn the rules. Whether you're a teen or a parent, you can improve. I really like the Blue Book of Grammar and Punctuation, which you can grab anywhere, Amazon, whatever. It has pre-tests that help pinpoint problem areas so that you can troubleshoot. You can read up on the rules. You can practice with simple exercises. It's not a full-blown curriculum, but it's great for brushing up. Also, All About Homophones from All About Learning Press can help a student correctly use and spell confusing words that sound the same, such as there and there, which is a big confusion for many people. Your and your, it's and its. It's for multiple grade levels from 1 through 8, but really it's for all ages because spelling is spelling, right? So we've talked about conventions. Let's talk about essay writing skills. So essays and research papers are often the bane of a high schooler's existence, but a few simple tips will set your teen off on the right foot and will save hours of red penciling later on. Your kids will need to learn how to write a clear thesis statement. This provides focus for both the reader and the writer. It should state the research paper's main message in 1 or 2 sentences. And then it kind of provides a framework for the essay. So as the student writes, she's going to be continually supporting this thesis statement with facts, details, examples, logic, and it will help her stay on track. A good thesis statement will do that. And if she steers clear of irrelevant information that will distract the reader from the main point, she's again helping to stay on track. By avoiding details that don't directly support the thesis, she'll produce a stronger essay. Another tip is don't rehash ideas. It's easy to fall into the trap of saying the same thing over and over in different ways. Instead, encourage your students to do a little more research so they can support their claims with fresh facts and examples instead of revisiting old ones. Then make a plan and stick to it. Essays and research papers need structure. They need an introduction. They need a body. They need a conclusion. Without structure, the paper will fall apart. Your student should avoid diving into the paper without first thinking the argument through and organizing thoughts into an outline. So instead of trying to rope scattered ideas together, she needs to herd them into formation before she begins to write. So it can mean outlining the paper from beginning to end to give her an idea of where she's going, listing the key points and hitting on the major supporting details. Your student is going to be relieved to know where she's going. It will keep her from getting off track, and the paper will be more focused and easier to write. Also, help your student focus on clarity and simplicity. It's not uncommon for young writers to try to impress parents, teachers with overwriting. It can take the form of too many big words, piling on too much detail or unnecessary detail, or taking rabbit trails. The content of a research paper or an essay must always point back to the thesis statement. It must always support the thesis statement. If it fails to do so, eliminate that fact, eliminate that detail, because it's going off on a different tangent. It's not relevant, and you want your kids to learn to keep their writing germane to the topic. Transition words are super helpful when writing essays. They help papers read more smoothly by providing logical organization. Sometimes students get in trouble moving from idea to idea. Without transitions, they can lose their readers because the connections don't make sense, or there just isn't a connection. So there'll be a challenge for the reader to follow your student's line of thought. Transition words will act as signals to the reader. So words like in addition or furthermore are going to tell the reader that a point is about to be expanded or explained. On the other hand, conversely, these are going to suggest that the writer will explore an opposite idea, right? And then therefore, and finally, and words that are similar to that will signal that a train of thought is coming to an end. So reading through the paper, paragraph by paragraph, makes a good test of fluency. If each paragraph makes sense on its own, your student probably made wise use of transitions. If not, have your student look for ways to add a transition word, or either use a new sentence with a transition sentence that will help to introduce new ideas. So again, reading through the paper, looking for places where things should connect but don't, or places where there's a change of thought. Make sure your child is learning to look for things like that so she can find a way to introduce her transitions. And finally, teach your kids about plagiarism. Plagiarism simply means copying another person's written work and calling it your own. It is the same as stealing, and what has been stolen is another author's unique way of formulating ideas into his own words. You need to teach your kids the proper way to credit the sources they will use in their research paper or essay whenever they're relying on an outside source. There will be other writing skills that your students will also need to work on and improve. For instance, their style, the form, and the structure of an essay. So it's not just adding details, adding facts using transitions, but it's also learning to identify and narrow a topic, develop a thesis, brainstorm, organize, outline, edit, and revise. Then there's the whole thing of sentence structure. To make their compositions sound more mature, students need to learn to write more advanced and complex sentences. So teach them either through your writing curriculum or your grammar program, or just through your own personal exercises, how to begin sentences with different parts of speech. Begin a sentence with a participle, an adverb, use prepositional phrase or subordinating conjunction. Teach students to do this so that their sentences have a more mature, developed sound to them. Also, teach them to use imagery and poetic devices in their writing. Not that they're writing poetry when they write an essay or a report, but teach them to use metaphors, similes, personification to make their writing sound more interesting and mature. It's a different way of teaching them to use comparisons, which is always important and a great way to add to their writing. So now let's take a peek at a short essay. So essay writing is going to help students develop their writing and critical thinking skills. They can write different kinds of essays, but most importantly, they'll need to write an argumentative essay, persuasive essay, and expository essay. Expository essays can take the form of explaining a process, comparing or contrasting cause and effect, a literary review, a reflection essay, lots of different ways, and they should write these essays multiple times. So take care not to say, oh, we already did a compare and contrast essay, because one is really not enough. It's a practice you should do repeatedly, maybe a couple times a year, and then every year, so that it becomes a proficiency for your child instead of just something like a one and done. Other essay skills will include being able to summarize a written work, learning to evaluate and analyze evidence, and learning to develop their own opinions into reasoned arguments. And finally, let's move into the timed essay. The timed essay equips your team for the essay portions of college entrance exams and what I mentioned earlier, essay situations in college, where they will be in a class setting and be given a timed essay as part of an evaluation for the course or an end of a chapter test or something, where they will be in class writing on paper with their pen and not having any other helps or tools or computers or whatever. This provides training for them in time management, planning, writing, and review. It puts the emphasis on 5 key components: content and organization. For instance, you want to begin by using a widely accepted model: intro, body, conclusion. Once they're comfortable with a simple basic essay, they have the freedom to expand, but this model gets them started and gives them something to begin to hang these early essays on. The second thing is vocabulary. Your child can improve vocabulary by avoiding weak and vague words, by finding synonyms for overly repeated words. And then the third one is sentence structure. We talked about that earlier. It applies to timed essays as well. Mechanics. Remember, we want to make sure that your student is using proper grammar, punctuation, spelling, because if they don't, it can make the brightest student appear uneducated. So help them pay close attention to these important aspects of their writing. And I mentioned some briefly, but in addition to poor spelling in general, some of the most common errors are going to be omitting or misusing apostrophes, using quotation marks improperly, using comma splices, having run-on sentences in their compositions, incomplete sentences or fragments, and homophone confusion. Once your student knows how to develop and polish essays in a pressure-free setting, then it's time to begin writing against the clock. A timed essay is going to help train your student to pace himself and to learn to break essays into smaller parts and devote a certain number of minutes to each segment of the timed essay. At first, a student should go through the process with assistance. So parent prompting means you're giving your student verbal cues. You have 1 minute to read the writing prompt. Go. Then they read the prompt. After a minute's up, you say, you have 1 minute to choose your position. Go. You have 1 minute to write a thesis statement. Go. Give your kids a guide sheet that shows the timed breakdown and give them a clock. As your student practices timed essays, and you're doing this, timed essay doesn't require but 25, 30 minutes out of your week. So you don't have to do preparation. They don't have to know stuff. They just need to sit and write. And as they practice, you can start eliminating these crutches and slowly remove them until your student can pace himself without the guide sheet, without your verbal cues, and without any helps from you, and he can rely on the clock alone. The secret to a successful timed essay is practice. Practice, practice. If you play a sport, you play an instrument, you know that there are skills or plays that you do without even thinking. Was it always automatic? No. What happened? Practice. Practice is the key. With practice, the process becomes more intuitive. It reduces the fear factor that comes from writing timed essays. If you can assign essays regular to keep their skills sharp, you're going to help your student be way ahead of the game. So every couple of weeks, if they're in 9th grade, and maybe 3 times a month if they're in 10th through 12th grade. In WriteShop 2, in addition to teaching other kinds of essays, we do teach timed essay writing as well. If you have a 10th or 11th grader who has a foundation in descriptive, expository, and narrative writing, they can jump right into WriteShop 2. Otherwise, we encourage most 7th to 10th graders to begin with WriteShop 1 first. Now let's talk about the research paper. This is basically a series of related essays. So once you've taught your teens to write a good, solid essay, they are well on their way to a strong research paper. Additional research skills that you'll want to teach are making an outline, using reference materials, gathering note cards, writing a report, citing sources. And then you need to decide how many research papers you want to assign and how long you want those papers to be. So if you begin in 9th grade teaching research writing, they can write one paper of 4 to 6 pages during that year. They don't need a lot of research writing as freshmen. In 10th grade, again, one paper is fine, but make it longer. Instead of 4 to 6 pages, you can expand this one 5 to 8 pages. Once they reach their junior year, one paper, but preferably 2, maybe 1 per semester, 6 to 12 pages for the length of that paper. And then in their senior year, I would encourage you to have them do 2 or even 3 8 to 15 page research papers. So as we wrap this up, I have a word for parents. First, start fresh. Has time been the culprit for you? Maybe you need to give up another subject or an extracurricular activity in order to have the time to devote to writing. And I'm speaking to the general non-COVID year. I mean, obviously now we all have a whole lot more time than we did, back when we didn't have isolation. But just to say that writing is one of those non-negotiable subjects that forms a basis for academic success. And so you really do want to make sure you're giving enough time to it and you're making a commitment to see your writing program through. If you're not using a formal curriculum, you still need to commit to assigning writing on a regular basis. As an alternative, see if there's a good writing class available online or in your community. It could be a co-op class. It can be a community college class your student can take for dual credit. You can team up with a writing tutor. But I can't say it plainly enough. Your student is just not going to survive in college without solid writing skills. So not only do I want to encourage you to start fresh, but I want to encourage you to make a plan. Sit down with your writing program and a calendar and begin planning assignments to help you and your teens stay on track. With older high schoolers, you probably realize time is running out. So if you're concerned about the SAT essay, for example, which is not required anymore, but for some kids that may be something that you feel they need to take or the university is requiring it, your student will need to learn this timed essay skill well in advance of the test so that there's plenty of time to practice. But no matter what, arm yourself with a plan and stick to it, or your teen's going to slip back into old habits of not completing work. So this means determining a schedule to follow, sticking with the schedule, supervising your student's work to make sure he's doing it, and editing and returning papers on time so he doesn't fall behind on writing assignments. Once your student has learned the basics of essay writing, both timed and untimed, you can devote the rest of high school to more advanced writing, including longer essays, literary analysis, and research papers. And the third thing is stick to your guns. This is the hard part, helping your child develop self-discipline, seeing that your child follows a schedule. If your child is used to giving excuses for why he didn't get around to doing his writing assignment at the end of the day, and you are used to letting it slide, now's a chance to kind of turn over a new leaf and look at it differently. Maybe you want to make him do writing first thing in the morning. But regardless, hold your student accountable and don't let him off the hook. And then finally, follow through. If this has not been your strong suit in the past, recommit to helping prepare your student for college. First, by teaching and overseeing writing, and second, by adhering to deadlines. If your student knows you won't check up on him, he's going to fritter away his time. If he realizes you're not going to hold his feet to the fire and impose consequences for incomplete work, he's not going to perform for you. But if you do, then he'll give you better work and be more likely to stick to the time frame. I want to take a moment just to say you want to encourage independence in your students. You don't want to be watching over their shoulders every minute of the day, especially as they get older. If you start training them younger, they will be more independent in their last couple of years of high school. So don't wait until the very end to train them. But if you need to, because it is their junior or senior year, just know that they're going to need a little bit more accountability from you than they're used to, because they don't know how to work independently. And once you've trained them in independence, they'll be able to do this on their own. A program like WriteShop can really help you and your child develop discipline through schedules and lesson plans, step by step, through the writing process, student and teacher editing with a goal of revising and polishing the writing, and lots of hand-holding through the teacher's guide. Now, if your student is listening today, I have a word for you too. Well, several. The first is be teachable. Your parent is your teacher, and it's your job to be respectful and to be willing to do what's asked of you. And sometimes that's hard, and I get it, but be teachable. That goes a really long way. Second is follow the plan. You'll be really grateful for the guidelines. If you have that plan in front of you, it's going to quicken and shorten your work. Third is to develop self-discipline. Yes, you have a role in becoming a more independent worker. Prove yourself faithful and worthy of your parents' trust. Do the work. Stop making excuses. No more whining or wheedling or manipulating mom and dad to letting you get away with late or incomplete work. And write. To close up, the key to success is parents, be intentional. You and your kids will be happier in the end. And just imagine the joy of being able to say, we reached our goal. I'm so glad that you were able to sit in on this workshop, and I hope that it offered you some tips and some encouragement. I know that it's hard sometimes when you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, I'm so not there, and all the stuff that Kim just talked about, I feel like a total failure. Please don't feel like a failure. We can all start right now where we are. Start fresh. And you can do this. I have confidence in you. And I've seen so many parents be able to turn around in the writing area and getting their kids prepared for college. And you've got this, Mom. We trust it. You've got it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing WriteShop with you. If you have any questions, you can reach us at orders@writeshop.com, or you can visit our website at writeshop.com. Thanks.